Cuando compartimos, nos sentimos mucho más cercanos, mucho más conectados. El poder de compartir derriba las barreras del tiempo y espacio. Lo hacemos con recuerdos, alegrías y reconocemos que lo mejor que se puede compartir son las experiencias. Es por eso que hemos creado para ti un espacio de inspiración colectiva, donde nos hemos dado la tarea de reunir a líderes en su área, para contar historias que impactan y trascienden. Desde aprendizajes clave en la industria hasta compartir vivencias y retos personales y profesionales. Te acercamos con voces que buscan conectar. Acompáñanos a transformar juntos el concepto de ideas en una verdadera experiencia de valor. Shared Experiences, un espacio de inspiración colectiva.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Muy buenas tardes. Bienvenidas y bienvenidos a esta edición de Share Experience que vamos a estar trabajando el día de hoy. Es para mí un gusto estar aquí con ustedes. Mi nombre es Marcelo Ramírez y voy a estar apoyándoles durante la sesión en caso de que tengan algún tema que requieran apoyo en el uso de la plataforma, el manejo de las opciones que vamos a estar utilizando. Bueno, pues Zoom cada vez nos da mejores posibilidades para poder acercarnos y tener a la mano todas las herramientas para aprovechar al máximo estos espacios. Entonces, bueno, pues el video inicial nos dio una clara referencia de lo que es y de qué se trata este espacio para que podamos compartir todas estas experiencias, que puedan ustedes llevarse lo mejor de los expertos y expertas que nos han estado acompañando. Y bueno, pues para iniciar, quisiera darles un breve recorrido. Todos conocemos ya la plataforma Zoom, que en los últimos años nos acercaron a este tema de la virtualidad. Quiero recordarles que en la parte inferior tenemos estos controles de micrófono y video para poder activar o desactivar esas funciones. En este momento está desactivada la función del micrófono para poder garantizar un entorno que asegure la experiencia de todas y todos nosotros. Es muy importante para todos nosotros que se lleven la mejor experiencia en este momento. Recordemos que si si abrimos nuestro micrófono de manera accidental, bueno, podemos afectar la experiencia de quienes nos acompañan aquí en esta sesión y pues obviamente la nuestra propia. Entonces, vamos a escuchar atentamente todo lo que nuestro invitado de hoy, nuestro speaker estrella de hoy, tiene para poder compartirnos. En la parte central, pues vamos a poder ver quiénes nos acompañan, vamos a tener el botón del chat. En el chat van a poder estar colocando durante la sesión las preguntas que tengan. Esto es muy importante, ya que la idea es que podamos irnos de corrido toda la conferencia y al final vamos a dedicar un espacio para preguntas y respuestas que Tom, muy amable, nos va a dar el espacio para poder responder. Y bueno, en esta parte, quiero decirles, aunque no viene señalizado por aquí porque es las primeras veces que lo utilizamos, en esta parte tenemos un icono de traducción. Lo pueden ver por ahí, es un icono, es como un mundito que trae ahí los meridianos ahí dibujados para que ustedes al inicio de la conferencia con Tom puedan seleccionar esta opción y estar escuchando a nuestro traductor que nos está acompañando el día de hoy, Daniel de Regil, y nos va a estar apoyando para que ustedes puedan estar recibiendo, si es más cómodo para ustedes, el audio en español. Entonces hay que seleccionar este botón, va a estar en off o desactivado, y para que ustedes puedan entrar a la opción de la traducción simultánea hay que seleccionar español para que puedan estar escuchando a Daniel. Quien así lo desee puede continuar toda la conferencia en inglés, darle seguimiento, y al final de la sesión vamos a desactivar esta parte de la conferencia de la traducción simultánea para todos estar en el mismo audio y Daniel nos va a ayudar con las preguntas que vayamos a estar haciendo. Entonces, espero que esto haya sido de claridad para todas y todos ustedes. Con mucho gusto, ahorita terminando esta presentación, revisamos el chat para ver si alguien tiene alguna duda y colocarles nuevamente estas instrucciones a través del chat. Entonces, pues muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Quiero decirles, bueno, ya les comenté la sesión de preguntas y respuestas y pues ahora sí viene lo bueno, ¿no? Vamos a entrar en materia. Quiero presentarles a nuestro experto que nos acompaña el día de hoy. Él es Tom Haak, es director del HR Trend Institute y nos dará un recorrido por las importantes tendencias en el ámbito de las personas y cómo influyen las personas en las organizaciones. Y sobre todo también cómo estas tendencias conforman el futuro laboral de las organizaciones. También nos ayudará a saber cómo las organizaciones pueden utilizar estas tendencias para elevar o incrementar su relevancia con relación a todos los involucrados en este proceso productivo y laboral. Estamos hablando de clientes, de fuerza laboral y, por supuesto, de la sociedad. Es un placer para mí presentarles este mediodía a Tom Haak, dejarlos con él. Tom Haak, welcome to Tecnológico de Monterrey. Tecnológico de Monterrey. It's a pleasure for us to have you here, and you can start now. The stage is yours.
All right, and well, it's a big pleasure for me to be here with you today. I hope you can all hear me and see me clearly. And so, as said, I'm Tom Haak. I'm director of the HR Trend Institute, and you could say I'm a trend watcher in the domain of people and organization. And I write about it, I speak about it, I make videos about it. And my main mission is to inspire you and to inspire other people that work and life at work can be a lot more fun and can be a lot better. So if after this session of today, you would like to know and learn more, please link to me on LinkedIn, Tom Haak, LinkedIn. Visit the YouTube channel at Tom Haak YouTube, or go to the website of the HR Trend Institute, hrtrendinstitute.com. So there's ample material. Today, I will lead you through a couple of things, and at the end of my session, I will speak for about 40 minutes, and then there will be ample time for Q&A. Put your questions in the chat box, and well, I hope there are many questions, and I will try to answer as many as possible at the end of the session. My Spanish is rather poor. I'm a Duolingo Spanish speaker on level 2. So I hope maybe that next year I can address you in Spanish, but it will take a huge effort. If I look at the world of work at this moment, and at the end of 2001, I phrased my theme for this year, for 2022. And as theme for this year, I talked about it is from adaptation to transformation. So that is the common theme for what I see happening at this moment. And I will explain to you why I choose this theme. And we have seen in the last 2 years, especially in the COVID-19 crisis, that organizations were quite able to adapt. Many organizations were remarkable quick in adapting to the new situation, people working from home, people working in other circumstances. But now is the question, are we able to really transform the way we are working instead of more, only adaptation and maybe even going back to the old situations? There are 4 transformations, elements of transformations that I find important, and I would like to describe to you. Number one is the digital transformation, and that's a long-term transformation in organizations and also at, you could say, in the field of work. So the digital transformation. What we have seen, and I of course look at it from, you could say, a human resource perspective, a people perspective. What we have seen that a lot of technology that is used at work was used for, you could say, efficiency purposes. So a lot on efficiency, on making sure we can work faster and more efficient. The technology that is really there to improve the experience of people at work, to technology that is there to help people to do their work better, well, that is maybe a little bit more scarcer, and I will come back to that. The digital transformation, long-term transformation, and we have only, you could say, touched the surface. There's a lot of possibilities for further digitization. The second transformation I would like to describe to you is the leadership transformation. Also a long-term transformation. That is the transformation from the traditional view on leadership, where leaders are at the top and leaders determine the way and the strategy of the organizations, to leadership that is more distributed, leadership that is more dispersed, leadership that is more in the hands of the co-workers. That's a long-term transformation. We have seen also during the COVID-19 crisis that people and teams have experienced that they were able to work more autonomous, that they were able to work more at a distance from the people in charge. So people have sensed there are enormous possibilities. The question is also leadership, the traditional leadership, able to make that transformation? And who is helping organizations in this leadership transformation? So the digital transformation, the leadership transformation, and the third one, I already alluded to it, is the transformation of the workforce. That's also a long-term transformation. You could say archetypical, it is from the employees as people who are owned by the organizations, employees that are on the payroll, to, you could say, people who are co-creators, owners of the organization. So from employees to co-creators, somewhere co-workers in the middle. If I read literature, if I read what people say about important issues, they often phrase it in traditional wording, like, how can we motivate our employees? How can we keep our employees as long as possible in the organization? Well, you know, those days are gone. We better view employees in a different way. And the workforce, in many organizations, the workforce consists of many people who are contributing. It's people on the payroll, it is temporary workers, it is people at suppliers, it is people at universities, it is students. So there's a wide group of people that are contributing to the goals of organizations. And it's important to take all those people into account and not only limit ourselves to the people on the payroll who are part of our hierarchy. So the third transformation we have to take into account, the workforce transformation. And the fourth one, also a long-term transformation, you could call that the organizational transformation. And again, I picture it a little bit black and white, but that is from organizations that are internally looking, from organizations that are mainly focusing on their own goals and objectives, to organizations that play an important role in society. Organizations that are helping the world to become a better place. Organizations that are very involved in solving big world issues, like, to mention a few, sustainability, for example. The whole issue of sustainability and climate is an issue where organizations cannot shy away and say, oh, well, that is not part of our remit. But also, of course, issues around diversity and equity, equality. And there are many more big issues in Europe, for example, at this moment. Of course, there's a war going on. So also there's issues where organizations cannot say, not for us. So that's a long-term transformation where the role of organizations in society is changing. And that's also an expectation, of course, of not only the people in organizations, but it's also driven by the expectations of people in society. So 4 transformations I want to sketch to you. I talked about the digital transformation, the leadership transformation, the workforce transformation, and the organizational transformation. Long-term, important to take into account, and as a kind of basis for the theme from adaptation to transformation. What I want to outline now to you is, and if you take a little notepad and make some, I don't use slides because especially in these online presentations, you see big slides and a very small Tom Haak that I don't like. I like you to really be able to see me. It's not so complex what I talk about, but if you take a paper and maybe you can note down 10 points. I'm going to cover 10 points. And afterwards, you could ask yourself, in my organization, in the organization where I work, it could be a public organization, it could be a private organization, to what extent are we currently using these trends to tackle our big issues? So that's a key question. The trends in itself are not, they are important, but it's not about the trends and everybody should use all the trends. That's not the key message. The key message is there are trends. They are going on, whether you like it or not. The question is, which of those trends can you use to tackle your big issues? Important, and you could, what you could do is make a kind of assessment where you stand at this moment. So 10 I'm going to cover. The first one I called let's embrace complexity. And what we see, especially in the world of work and in human resources, there's a tendency to oversimplify things. And there's a tendency which is very difficult to kind of kill, is to look for general solutions that fit everywhere and for everybody. And that is very difficult. I will mention a couple of examples. For example, we all know leadership models. Many organizations, they say, okay, we have made a model where our leaders should fit in. And if you go to my website, hrtrendinstitute.com, I have a collection of, in the meantime, I think more than 100 leadership models. They try to push leaders in a model. And to be honest, many of those models look the same. They always have, the leader should be able to create a vision. The leader should be able to communicate the vision. The leader should be able to manage his or himself. The leader should and choose other people. Well, we all know those things. And we also know that it's very difficult to find leaders who nicely fit in these round models. So the world is more complex. Some people are good in some elements, some people are good in other elements. And the question is, maybe it's better to build on the strengths of people, but that makes life a little bit more complex. Because we cannot say, this is the checklist for the leaders. If you don't fit, we don't hire you. So the use of models is one example of that complexity. I'm a psychologist, so I'm educated as a psychologist. We know that human behavior is not so easy to predict. Human behavior is complex. It's not so easy to predict. Even if we use a lot of data and gather a lot of data, still it's difficult to predict human behavior. And sometimes in the questions people ask, they want too simple solutions. How can we retain the talent in our organization? There is not the one answer to that question. There's a lot of complexity there, and we better take that into account. So don't simplify too much. Number 2 on my list, and the order of the trends I currently see is, it's not in order of importance, it's just 10 points, and you can mix them any way you like. Number 2 might be a little bit controversial. This is specifically for the people, and I assume some of you are in the HR profession, some of you are not, some of you maybe lead people in the HR profession or have HR professionals in their organization. Number 2 on my list, I called HR as activists. We can expect, or we should expect, the people in the HR positions to take a more activist role. And I will explain why. In many organizations, there are things wrong. For example, there's abuse. For example, people are working in unsafe working conditions. For example, there's a lack of diversity. What you often see when you read reports about things that go wrong in organizations, what you don't see is a very active role of the people in the HR profession. A simplistic example again, that's the differences in pay for women and men. It's a global phenomenon that, generally speaking, women get paid less than men in similar positions. And that gap is not super small. That gap often is 10 or more percentage points. That has been going like that for a long time. And the gap, well, it's not getting a lot smaller. So what are organizations doing? And more specifically, if you are an HR professional, what are you doing? Because this is relatively simple to deal with, the salary gap, closing the salary gap. There are other more complicated issues, but the willingness to address that is very important. Number 3, and I already talked about that in the transformation of the workforce, and that is that, let's say, it's about people management. Let's call it people management for the ecosystem. It's not people management only for the people on the payroll, but it's the question, what can we do for the more wider workforce? What are we doing? What are we doing for people who temporarily work for us? Are they treated as second-rate citizens, or are we also offering them, for example, developmental opportunities? What are we doing for suppliers? Our suppliers are often smaller organizations. Are we also able to help the people at our suppliers to become better people at work and maybe also outside work? So that is in terms of workforce. You could also widen it again and say, hey, what are we doing for our local communities? Are we not only working for our organization, but are we also, as an organization, trying to make our local communities better? And then I already talked about that. At the question, outside the communities, it's more about wider society. So don't lock yourself up. And you see more and more, this is going to become a very important issue. The changing workforce and the trend connected to that, I called the end of the employee. And that is very much connected to the trend, let's call that for the moment, personalization. And if there's one trend I would like you to still remember, and it has been on my list now for a couple of years, this is about personalization. Are you willing and able to take the individual wishes, needs, preferences, capabilities of people into account? Are you willing to do that? And are you using the data you collect about people to tailor your organization and the way you structure your organization to those people? Again, an example. I don't know how it is in Mexico and the other countries from the participants here at the moment, but we hear a lot these days again about the war for talent. The war for talent. We cannot find the people. Where are the people? And those organizations often still use the traditional job descriptions as the starting point of their search, instead of going out there and looking at the people who are available in the labor market, what they want, what are they looking for, what are the capabilities, and how can we organize ourselves maybe in a different way so that we can use the capabilities that are available in the market. There are more and more people who don't want to be employed. There are people who say, well, you know, I like my profession, I like to do nice work, but I don't want to be on the payroll of an organization. In personalization, it's important to say, okay, what can we do for those people? How can we make sure that we use the skills and capabilities also of people who don't want to be employed and who don't want to be on the payroll? So think about, also for your organization, what does it mean that the traditional view of the employee is changing? And are we taking that into account? And are we using the opportunities created by that? The fifth one I want to put you on the list is the development of the metaverse. And I'm sure you have heard about the development of the metaverse. The question is it new? It's not totally new, because the metaverse is basically the kind of blending of the virtual and the real world, and creating, in a sense, a new world. Let's call it the metaverse for the moment, where the real world and the virtual world can be combined in a very attractive way. We are partly doing that today, you could say. This is a very flat metaverse, Tom on a screen or Tom on a television. I'm not an avatar, I hope. At the moment, at least, I'm not, but I could be an avatar. And you could be in those chairs behind me with your avatar. And maybe we then could have a more livelier session than a little bit difficult session we have today in Zoom, where I see 3 people. I know there are more people in the audience, but it's very difficult for me to make this a real experience. If I would be in the middle of the room, your avatars would be there. We could create a different experience. We could maybe already do that today using virtual reality, etc. Technology is developing fast. We more see it maybe in the game industry today than in the world of work, but the developments go fast, and you better start thinking, how can we use the metaphors in our organizations for recruitment, giving people a real experience of what it looks like or what it feels like to work in our organization, for induction, for training, for meetings. Well, there's numerous opportunities. The metaverse is already here. It will develop faster, and a lot of technology companies are investing a lot of money in that. I'm just looking at the chairman, whether everything is okay and whether people, is the speed okay, chairman? I hope so. Yeah, that you can follow. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I see.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope. Yeah. Sometimes it looks
Okay,
like
you.
I'm talking into a black hole, and so it's good to have some feedback now. Thank you very much. So I covered 5 elements. I'm now going into the second 5 in the coming 5 to 10 minutes. Number 6, I called forgiving technologies. And it's interesting that the term forgiving technology I took from the fashion industry. The fashion industry, they are creating forgiving clothes, designing forgiving clothes. For example, if I grow fatter, my clothes grow with me. So I don't have to buy new clothes all the time. Luckily, I'm still slim. But so there's fashion that can adapt to the person who is wearing it. So you don't have to buy new clothes all the time. Technology, if you look at the technology in the workplace, it's often forcing people into standardized workflows. It's forcing people in workflows they don't like. It's either too tight, it's too wide, it does not fit exactly, again, to the needs, wishes, capabilities of persons. I'll give you again a simple example, but in many organizations they use performance management software. And we all have experienced that, and that performance management software generally forces people in an annual workflow. Target setting at the beginning, mid-year review, end of year review. And if I'm a manager, the software pushes me in that workflow. It says, Tom, beginning of the year, this is what you should do. And if I don't do it, we shut down your computer. So you better do it. If the technology would be more forgiving and adapting, it would look differently. For example, if I am Tom and I'm an experienced, obedient manager, yes, experienced and obedient, then the software knows Tom always does what we ask him. And Tom knows what is expected of him because he is experienced. So you only have to gentle trigger me once at the beginning of the year, and then I will do everything that is necessary. No need to push me and to chase me and to check me. I do what is asked of me. If I'm Tom, an inexperienced manager, first time appointed in a job, I need more guidance. So you offer me some training, you offer me guidance, you offer me coaching so that I can learn to do the performance management process in a good way. It's two examples of how can we use the technology to adapt to the user. And we don't see a lot of that today still in the workplace. Forgiving technologies, enormous opportunities. Number 7 on my list. Number 7 is recruiting for diversity. And how can we make sure, and diversity, equality are high on the list of many organizations, how can we make sure that we use recruiting to come to a more diverse workforce? And it also tackles the issue, which I already mentioned, around the war for talent. One, and this is connected to a very important long-term trend again, and that is the movement away from jobs. So away from jobs, many organizations today are still structured around org charts with clear job profiles and descriptions. Organizations are moving away from that and working more with roles, teams with people in roles, and behind the roles, capabilities and skills. So it's more looking, what are the skills we need in this team, instead of saying we have all people in jobs. If you look more at skills, and I hope I'm able to explain it good, you become a lot more flexible in the way you organize your teams. And it also becomes easier to use people who have, you could say, a very focused skill set. Okay? If I can only do skill A very good, often I don't fit in the job description, because now the job description says you should do A and you should be a good team worker and you should do C and D. Yeah, but I can only do A very good. If you build your organization more around those skills, then you can say, hey, but here we have Tom, he can do A very well. How can we fit him in and use his skills A in the most appropriate way? And in that way, you are able to pull in your organization people with, I call it people, you could say people with limited skill sets, but maybe there's another term you can use in a better way. If you are serious about diversity, my message is start with looking at your recruitment process. Who are you looking for, and how can you make sure you recruit a more diverse workforce? There's a lot more to say about it, because it's also about structuring your selection processes in an unbiased way. But today, unfortunately, I don't have time to say a lot about it. Is there somebody? Okay, I hear some noise. If you can shut off your microphone, that is probably helpful. Number 8 on my list. I hope you can still keep track. I will maybe summarize them later. I'm on number 8. If you look at your paper, number 8. And number 8, yeah, I can't find the real good term, but this is to do with some real empathy. And it has to do with really putting the people in the organization centrally. And many organizations say it, and they say, oh yeah, the people are the most important thing in our organization and people first. But if you look at their day-to-day practices, well, there's a big gap. People don't feel that way. It is shifting a little bit, and I think the COVID-19 crisis helped in a way, but there's a lot more to do here. If you ask people, how do you feel at work? Many people still give answers in like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. And maybe that is not good enough. Maybe our aspirations should be a lot higher. So some real empathy, but that requires a constant dialogue with the people, with the workforce about, okay, how are you doing? How can we help you to do your work better? Not only your work, but also how can we help you to become a better person? How can we help you with your other issues? And well, not many organizations are doing that today. And it's connected to number 9. And number 9, I didn't call it that way, but that's about life coaching. There was a time when organizations said, there's a big split between work and private life. We focus on work. We don't want to get involved with the private life of people. Well, it has been shown that is very difficult to keep that disconnect. People are the same people at work, at life. So it's better to help them not only to become better at work, but also to become better in their other aspects of life. And that's why you see life coaching increasing. There are more and more organizations that are offering people life coaching to really help them to become, in a way, better persons, and not only focused on the work aspects. And that leads to the last trend I want to discuss today. There are more, but due to time, I promise to stop in 40 minutes. But one question is, how do you organize this? There's all these things going on. If you look again at the people function, people and culture, or let's call it human resources, how do we organize that in the best possible way? And what you see leading organizations doing at this moment is kind of splitting the HR function, It's split in 3 parts. One part is operations. And operations is running the HR machine, you could say. And most of the current HR practices are in operations. Operations has to do with technology, automation, but also with service. Are we fast? Are we quick? Are we offering people a real experience? Operations. The second element is, you could say, people architecture, people strategy. You need some people there who can help organizations to design an impactful people strategy. You don't need many people, but you need high-level people who can do that. And many people aspire to be there. The question is, it really requires a lot of skills to be able to function there. The third element, and that has to do with that element of life coaching and the real focus on the people, today that is often called people success. So those are people really focused on the people in the organization and helping them to become better at work, but also in other aspects of their life. And that function, well, it should be kind of independent and only loosely connected to the organization. Not many organizations really do that today. It's still often organization first, people second, and that shift hopefully can be pushed further. So I've covered, and if you look at your paper, you can check whether you have them all. I've talked number 10 was the split of the HR position. Number 9 was life coaching. Are we helping our people in the organization to become better human beings? Number 8 was real empathy. Are we really putting the people centrally? Or are we just saying it but acting differently? And I've put my papers in the different order. Number 7, recruiting for diversity. Look at your recruitment practices, look at the way you're organized, and push for more diversity. Number 6 was forgiving technologies. Are we using the possibilities of technology to adapt to the users in the organization? The metaverse, let's hope that will be a lot of fun in the metaverse. The end of the employee, so get rid of all those old-fashioned statements about we own the people, etc. No. How can we, with our people, with our workforce, create our goals and help our clients?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned about recruiting diverse people in the organization, which is something that most organizations are trying to do now. But how about the process of or the transition for someone who's not used to diversity and is already working for that company? Do you have any suggestions regards to training or how to prepare the staff to become more open-minded and diverse and welcoming?
Yeah, and that's a big question and not so easy to answer. Many organizations are dealing with it, but it starts, that's part of my end, it starts with thorough analysis. And the analysis is, okay, what are the elements that are hindering diversity in the organization? And you say, well, it might be a cultural element, it might be the way our leaders behave, but there might be many other elements. So generally it helps to start with the facts, start with analysis, and then start tackling those issues. I will give one example. I know an organization that was pursuing, say, well, we want to have more females in senior positions in the organization, and they meticulously measured many elements, you could say, in the work life of people or in the employee life cycle, and they found some striking data. For example, the interactions, manager, employee, man, women, if the boss was a man and the employee was female, were shorter than the man-man interactions, which is maybe understandable, because men feel more comfortable with men, they talk longer, etc. But that gave them ammunition to become more rigid in structuring the interactions. For example, saying performance reviews last 45 minutes. And these are the subjects on the list of the performance review, instead of an open conversation that lasts longer, man-man, and shorter, man-man, female. This is just a tiny example, but part of the answers lie in measuring what is going on, where are the bottlenecks, and how can we tackle them. But generally, those processes are very long-term processes, unfortunately. So I've come to the end, and then we have already started the Q&A. But in the end, I hope so. You have your list of 10 important trends. You have the 4 transformation areas. And if you start playing with that and start assessing also your organization, where do we stand? Are we using it? I hope I've given you some ammunition. as I said, if you want to know more information, and before we start, go to link with me on LinkedIn, go to YouTube. There are many videos I made and with other people as well around some of these subjects, and the website hrtrendinstitute.com. And then we leave we start with the Q&A, and I can't see questions, but I hope to hear some questions from the audience or through the chairman as well.
Thank you so much, Tom, for this conference. Voy a apagar la opción de traducción simultánea para que Daniel nos pueda acompañar aquí en la sesión principal y pueda apoyarnos a hacer las preguntas que van a estar surgiendo para Tom. En este momento, desactivado la opción de la traducción simultánea. Daniel, si estás por aquí y nos puedes apoyar, ya tenemos algunas preguntas aquí a través del chat, te las voy a mandar de manera directa para que los puedas verificar. Si gustas poder encender tu audio, Daniel. Listo, Daniel, ahí lo puedes encender.
Ok, ahora sí, no me permitía quitar el mute.
Sí, gracias.
Sí, gracias.
Muy bien, bueno, pues aquí tenemos, no sé si puedas visualizar el chat, Daniel, y podernos abocar a la pregunta de Alicia Romero.
Alicia Romero, sí. Okay, good afternoon. In the HR practice of new working profiles of the metaverse, a profession and knowledge and more advanced knowledge and technologies will be demanded in this more exclusive recruitment.
I think there are a couple of things that are needed in any case. And you mentioned
que se necesitan en cualquiera de los casos.
You mentioned the need to understand technology. I think that's very important.
Mencionaste la necesidad de poder entender a la tecnología y yo creo que es muy importante.
There's a lot to say about technology, but we hear a lot about artificial intelligence. It's about the metaverse, understanding technology, but also the limitations of technology, because we cannot give our life to technology.
Y bueno, también como mencionamos, hay muchos aspectos de la tecnología, como inteligencia artificial, etcétera. Y bueno, hay algunas limitaciones, pero no podemos darle todo, ponerlo en las manos de la tecnología.
Yeah, so we need people who understand technology and are able with the technology to improve practices. And I think that's very important.
Entonces necesitamos poder tener a gente que pueda trabajar con la tecnología y que puedan subir la barra del uso de esta tecnología para mejorar las prácticas.
The second area is around analytics, people analytics, and data. Being fluent in analytics and data, or being able to work with people who are fluent in that.
La segunda parte es poder trabajar con los datos y los análisis, tener a gente que sea fluida o hábil, capaz para poder trabajar con estas dos áreas.
And that has a lot to do with the third area I would like to mention. That is the capability to work in agile ways in combination with design thinking. So master agility, agile working, and design thinking.
Y esto también sería el tercer punto, que sería el pensamiento ágil y el diseño del pensamiento, poder dominar todos estos aspectos.
Because we don't know, the metaverse is a good example. We don't know exactly what it is, what it will bring us. So we have to start experimenting with it, start experiencing it, start using it in critical areas and see if it works. And then we can start helping to evolve, help develop the metaverse.
Y bueno, el metaverso es un buen ejemplo debido a que es tan amplio el tema. Necesitamos practicar, usarlo para poder implementarlo en diferentes áreas y poder hacer el mejor uso del mismo.
Thank you very much, Tom. Daniel, tenemos otra pregunta. María Migueles. Aquí te las pasé por el chat.
Sí, un segundo. María Migueles, okay. Which transformation do you consider is the most important?
It's difficult to talk about because they go hand in hand. So it's not a choice. All those transformations go hand in hand. Where, let's say, the digital transformation is a kind of driver of many of the transformations. So that gives us enormous opportunities. But the most, maybe the most difficult transformations are those around organization and leadership, because sometimes we are so caught up. Sorry, yeah, I forgot the translator. Sorry.
No problem, thank you.
No, but
okay.
Sometimes we are so caught up in our traditional models, and I'm sure many of you experience that in their organizations. It's very difficult to get away from the traditional model. We hear a lot about, about what our leaders should do. We need strong leaders. We need strong leaders in the organization. We need strong leaders in the countries. That is the old model. The new model is, how can we create autonomous teams that are empowered to do the good things? But that transformation is very difficult. So that's high on, should be high on the agenda.
Ok, la pregunta de María Migueles fue ¿qué transformación considera la más importante? Y lo que comenta Tom es que prácticamente es el arraigo al liderazgo tradicional a comparación del la nueva transformación tecnológica. Es ese arraigo al estar enfocado particularmente en todo ese proceso tradicional y no abrirle las puertas a esa transformación moderna, por así decirlo. Eso es,
sí. Okay.
Gracias, Daniel. Thank you, Tom. Another question is from Montserrat Vega. Te la estoy poniendo aquí, Daniel. Adelante.
Okay. As HR function in a transformation process, what are your principal recommendations to support change management in the entire organizational structure?
Big question. The short answer is it's about focus. And it's the moment you talk about the whole organization and changing everything at the same time, that is too big. And it helps to say, okay, but where are our big organizational issues? And maybe we can focus on those areas that really help to drive and to solve those issues instead of trying to do everything at the same time.
Thank you. La pregunta fue como una función de RH en un proceso de transformación. ¿Cuáles son sus principales recomendaciones para apoyar el cambio en la administración en una completa estructura organizacional? Bueno, es una pregunta bastante grande y amplia, pero básicamente lo importante aquí sería enfocarse en las cosas principales de la organización para poder hacer esa transformación. Enfocarse en todo el aspecto global y grande es complicado, pero es más que todo enfocarse en las cosas que mayor impacto vayan a tener a la transformación, a la compañía.
Gracias, Daniel. Thank you, Tom. Y la última pregunta sería de Ingrid Charles. ¿La tienes aquí, Daniel? Si la puedes revisar.
Sí. Okay, do you have an example of the employee metaverse in the organizations?
Yeah, and that's as I said, it's early days, but the current examples of the metaverse are mainly found in employee selection and training. That's with the use of virtual reality, and with the use of virtual reality, You know, the Oculus Rift or other. You can really bring people into live situations, semi-live situations, and give them a real experience. For example, in training, I know of a company that is working in the oil and gas sector. They have to train their people in when an oil rig catches fire. Well, that's very difficult to say, but then they put people there in their virtual reality and they experience it nearly as real fire. And then they have to walk on the rig and to do the right things and push the right buttons. And so that's an example, but it's still very early days. But training, also employer branding, is bringing people in the workplace, not telling them about it, but letting them experience what it is to work in the company. And the third example is more in meeting areas. I have already been in meetings where there is a kind of possibility to create an avatar, and as an avatar enter meeting rooms and communicate with other avatars. And well, yeah, a lot of things have to happen, but I see it as a very positive development.
Ok, la pregunta fue, ¿tiene algún ejemplo del metaverso del empleado en las organizaciones? Y sí, menciona que por el momento es una etapa temprana, pero uno de los ejemplos podría ser la realidad virtual. Y también otro de los ejemplos sería el uso de ellas al momento de impartir una capacitación, un training. Un ejemplo es de una plataforma de petróleo, una plataforma petrolera, en donde los operadores de la misma plataforma están llevando una capacitación para poder apagar un fuego o algún incidente dentro de la plataforma. Entonces, hay muchas maneras en las que también, por ejemplo, en juntas se puede realizar con avatars. Se puede tener los avatars ahí presentes para poder tener una interacción virtual más concisa de alguna manera. Eso es todavía temprano, pero esos son algunos ejemplos.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Tom. Muy bien, muchísimas gracias por sus preguntas, muchísimas gracias por habernos acompañado en esta edición de Share Experience. Lamentamos los inconvenientes de audio que tuvieron por ahí en la traducción. Prometemos mejorarlos para la siguiente que tengamos en inglés. Es la primera vez que utilizamos la opción de traducción simultánea. Sin embargo, bueno, pues ya tuvimos a Daniel aquí para esta sesión de preguntas y respuestas y pues muchísimas gracias por sus aportes. Esto enriquece sin duda toda la información que Tom trajo. Muy importante, muy interesante ver cómo adaptamos la tecnología a nosotros, ¿no? En vez de adaptarnos nosotros a la tecnología, bueno, creo que ese es un gran reto, además de todo lo que estuvo mencionando Tom. Tom, it was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for being here. And good night for you there in Amsterdam. Sepan todos.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I was not able to answer all the questions, but please shoot them to me via LinkedIn, and I will try to answer them. So, hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto. Sepan que nos acompaña Tom desde Ámsterdam, entonces para ella ya es en la noche. Entonces, pues muchísimas gracias, Tom, nuevamente. Thank you very much, Tom. Y pues gracias a todas y a todos por acompañarnos. Esperamos que tengan una excelente tarde. Como ya lo comentó Tom, acérquense a él a través de sus redes sociales, acérquense a través de los videos que tiene en YouTube y él con la mejor intención y en cuanto les sea posible va a poder ayudarles con las preguntas que hayan quedado sin responder. Pues quisiéramos tener espacio para responderlas todas, pero bueno, es el tiempo que tenemos asignado, esperando que haya sido pues de gran provecho para todas y para todos ustedes. Muchas gracias nuevamente por acompañarnos y pues los esperamos en la siguiente edición de Share Experience. Muchas gracias.
Cuando compartimos, nos sentimos mucho más cercanos, mucho más conectados. El poder de compartir derriba las barreras del tiempo y espacio. Lo hacemos con recuerdos, alegrías y reconocemos que lo mejor que se puede compartir son las experiencias. Es por eso que hemos creado para ti un espacio de inspiración colectiva, donde nos hemos dado la tarea de reunir a líderes en su área, para contar historias que impactan y trascienden. Desde aprendizajes clave en la industria hasta compartir vivencias y retos personales y profesionales. Te acercamos con voces que buscan conectar, Acompáñanos a transformar juntos el concepto de ideas en una verdadera experiencia de valor. Shared Experiences, un espacio de inspiración colectiva.
Y bueno, para quienes estén por aquí y nos puedan apoyar con esta encuesta, ¿qué les pareció la conferencia con Tom Haak? Les invitamos a escanear este código QR con sus teléfonos, equipos móviles y nos puedan apoyar respondiendo esta encuesta. Esto pues nos sirve a nosotros mucho para traerles tópicos que sean de su interés, que puedan ayudarles para su desarrollo personal y profesional dentro de sus organizaciones. Así que si tienen un minutito, les prometo que no les va a quitar más de eso y les agradecemos mucho el apoyo para poder responderlo. La voy a dejar aquí y pues nuevamente agradeciéndoles mucho su presencia y su acompañamiento en esta conferencia.